I see Mr. Tom Wood coming in.
There you go, right
All
here.
right. All right. Well, welcome to the Rugged Human Podcast. My guest today is Mr. Tom Wood, founder of Mastery TV, and a entrepreneur extraordinaire, been a friend of mine for a long time, and he has a lot to offer. Just to recap, we're going to pick up the conversation on the power of positive thinking. And Tom's got some great stories and some great input on it. He's a perfect example in his own life of how positive thinking takes you far in life and helps you get through tough times and obstacles. But he also has some great stories. And I also wanted to talk about a few, people out in the news and media that have shown these traits. And I like to look at the traits that, make people excel at things. And Tom also happens to be a great soccer fan. And for those of you in Europe listening, football. So we're going to talk about some great soccer players that have exhibited a lot of examples about positive thinking. That being said, Tom, why don't you just give me a quick 5-minute recap of your history? What's a quick version of your story?
Well, I'll just give you a 2-minute version.
Sure.
Because it's just I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. Started off after college, went to work for IBM in Japan, and just felt claustrophobic. I know, in a company of 1,000 people, I just felt like I was a cog in the wheel, and I started my own business. And that was a nonprofit business, but it was not nonprofit on purpose. It was nonprofit because I had no idea what I was doing. It was a negative profit business, actually.
Okay.
But eventually I started four internet-based companies, and 2 were very successful, 2 failed miserably. I probably learned more from the failures than I did from the successes.
Yeah.
But you learn from what somebody says. You either win or you learn. And that's kind of the attitude I've always had, is you just can't lose in this life. As long as you have the right perspective, you'll never lose.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I talk about that all the time. Perspective shifting. And
that's my background.
Great.
And that I love soccer. I love competitive sports for what they bring out of people, not necessarily the win or the loss, but who we become because of the competition.
Right.
But I also recognize that competition is an ego thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I love your work because it's based in spirituality.
Sure.
And I've recently had a new view in the world, kind of a totally new perspective on the world. About a year ago, I had a mystical experience that showed me the truth of who we are and what we're about. Yeah. And I never could have projected this or thought of this, and it has completely taken my life in a different direction than I have in the past. So like you, I promote entrepreneurship with kind of the understanding that unless you put the spiritual aspect, and I don't mean religious can bring you the spiritual, but what I'm talking about is understanding the truth of who you are and where you, what's important. And more important than anything is love and how you treat people. And in the end, that's all that really ever matters anyway. So everything that we're going to talk about, making money, all that stuff is important for this life.
Right.
But in the end, you can't take any of that with you. And so once I put that together, the spiritual part, I cannot measure the way I used to measure. My life now is just pure. It's really about joy, and the money comes or it doesn't come, but it doesn't matter to me whether it comes or not. It's just the joy of the journey, meeting people like you. You're right. We've been friends for a while now, and I've started to find that I'm meeting more and more people like you, and it's been a blessing. And I'm truly happy to be on this podcast. One of the first people on your podcast. I'm very excited about that because
I'm excited. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Honestly, I think, your perspective and your experience really will, lend to anybody's day, just listening to some of the things that you have to say. And that's the reason, I asked you to come on, simply because I really admire your perspective, not just because it aligns a lot with mine, but it's
Yeah,
ultimately, you can't really argue with stuff that just works, right? And when people
right.
try so hard, and I think one of our conversations not long ago was, we've, in my life at least, I struggled, to through the mental and the physical things, and then I got pretty high levels of, physical decent shape, mental. I had the game going, and I had the entrepreneurship, I had the money, we had the cars, but I didn't have that spiritual side. So I
Yeah,
didn't really click until I put that together, like you said. And I do like to talk about that's kind of, my angle on, if you don't put that spiritual side together, you're not going to really be balanced. So that being said, um, tell me this story. You got to tell me the story the that relates to the power of positive thinking.
yeah. I mean, this is a very interesting story. I
Okay.
think I think everybody might. I think everybody will learn something from this story. It's a story of a woman who was born in the 40s. I think she was
Hmm.
born in the 40s, but she was born very, very poor. She had 12 brothers and sisters that were already born before her. She was
Yeah.
number 13, and she was born with pneumonia. Almost died. It wasn't just one lung; it was both lungs. So double pneumonia. Almost died. Survived. And then got polio and barely survived the polio. I mean, she had polio. What are you going to do? With polio, it's not it's a virus, but it's been um, hasn't been in our world in a long time. But with her, she was in braces. She couldn't walk. She was confined to a wheelchair. Um, and every time her mother took her to her doctor, she'd just change doctors every time the doctor said, um, you know, don't get your hopes up. Because her mother would say, that's all we have.
Hmm.
That's all we have is hope. We're poor. And this child is as beautiful and as deserving as every other child I've ever had. All 12 other children. Um, and that positive attitude didn't immediately translate to the girl. She was so frustrated. She would just cry and was frustrated every day. She'd see her brothers and sisters playing basketball. Um, and she would just sit in the sidelines, and she was just so down on herself. And her mother just stayed true to what she knew, and that is that what you think about comes about. And she would tell this to her child all the time and focus on the power of positive thinking. I know in some of your other episodes, you actually show the science of that, or the former episode, the one I just listened to, you talk about the science of it. Well, back then they didn't know the science. All
Right.
she had was this belief, and she'd go to a doctor, and the doctor say, "Okay, well, just make sure you do what you need to, but just don't get your hopes up. Next doctor, that's all we have is hope." And then one day, because of this positive thinking, this little girl, her foot started to move, and the paralysis started to disappear. And her mother celebrated that success and never really talked about, or never really, I should say, gave attention to the failures. Just gave celebration on the success. And it was those little tiny little successes that she
Hmm.
celebrated. Well, then it was not just the toe or the foot, the whole leg, and pretty soon, after all this physical therapy and belief, this girl was finally able to get out of her wheelchair and walk. Now the doctors said it was a miracle. I mean, they had never seen anything like this, and but the mother knew it wasn't a miracle. I mean, yes, it was a miracle because she believed in God, but she knew that it was the miracle was her belief. And when the doctor said, "Hey, she's walking, but she's not going to play basketball with her brothers and sisters," sorry, we got to get another doctor. And she kept that whole attitude. And one day, when she was about 14, she was out of her wheelchair playing basketball with her brothers and sisters. It's quite
Wow.
a remarkable accomplishment. Now, if that was the end of the story, it would be phenomenal. But it wasn't the end, because what happened is, because this girl had so much positive reinforcement on everything she did, it was like it built so much momentum that it wouldn't stop. So here she is, coming from almost dying as a child to getting polio, to overcoming polio and walking. Well, she said, "Well, I'm not going to just walk, I'm going to play basketball." And within a year, she was playing basketball with her brothers and sisters, running up and down the court. It was just amazing. And of course, that power of positive thinking, the momentum kept going. And by the time this girl was 19 years old, she was running. And she was not only running, she was running very, very fast. In fact, she was the fastest woman in the world. She won four gold medals, I believe,
Wow.
in the Olympics. Her name is Wilma Rudolph. And
Okay.
it's quite an extraordinary story.
Absolutely.
Never, when I heard the story, would I have ever thought that someone coming from that pain, someone
Mhm.
come from that limitation, could overcome it. I mean, this to me is bigger than running the 4 minute mile. You know,
Yeah.
we've heard that story many times. This is just this is the power of belief, the power of faith, and the power of positive thinking.
Yeah.
And you
Wow.
know, and
That's a
I
great
know some of
story.
your stories, as I mentioned before, have the science behind it. And what just strikes me. I wish I had that level of faith that she had. I mean,
Mhm.
the science gives me faith, but to believe and know before the science, that's like a gift. And
Yeah.
you know, I wish that on everybody. Um, so there you go. There's
Uh,
one of
yeah,
my
that's a
favorite
great
stories.
story, and I was actually going to talk about Oprah and
Yeah,
but and then I did talk a little bit about Chris Helmsworth in that study, or not
yeah.
study, but the show they did called Limitless. Um but being as you are a great soccer fan, football
No,
fan,
football.
as they would say in Spain, football, or in Mexico, they would say football. Um, I wanted to talk about Leo Messi.
Leo Messi,
And, you know,
in my opinion, the greatest soccer player of all time. I mean, I
okay,
shouldn't be
okay.
up for debate, but some people,
Well, what
it's hard.
about Ronaldo?
Ronaldo, great soccer player as well.
Okay,
Uh, just different players. And if you
sure,
look at I'm not gonna. Here's what I see. I see Ronaldo with an arrogance that gets him
hmm,
to where he needs to be, and we all see those people in business. They're
sure.
arrogant, right?
Hmm.
They just, I'm number one. Give it to me. Give me the ball. I'm the best. You can't beat me. And he has that attitude has served him well. But if you look at Messi,
Hmm.
it's just a different human being. He's
Right.
uh, he's all about his team. He's all about uh, his family. He's just kind, gracious human being, as you see it from the outside. He's not arrogant at all. He gives credit to his team. In fact, there's a great documentary of him uh, when he was growing up and being doing very very well for Newell's soccer
And he
club in
grew up in Argentina.
Argentina, very
Hmm.
poor,
Yep.
as you well know, and he played for forget the name of the team, Newell boys, and they were every time they would win, he was the star, and every time they'd win, the TV reporter would go to them and say, all right, who do you dedicate this? Who do you dedicate this match to? He goes to all the people, all my family, everybody. It was never about himself. It was always about the team, and I think he was taught that way, and that is what made him such a great soccer player, in my
Hmm.
opinion. And man, there are some. I mean, just go to YouTube and type in Lionel Messi,
Hmm.
greatest, top plays or whatever, and you'll see magic. You see
Right.
absolute magic with the soccer ball.
And some of the research that I did before the show is did you know that he had a growth hormone deficiency growing up?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. And that was one of the things that really held him back, because he's only 5'7". He was a little
right.
guy for some of those guys out there. And his talent took him beyond all that. But his skill as a soccer player, that's what got him to Spain. His parents said, "Hey, let's up and go to Spain," and that's where he caught the attention of the Barcelona team. And that's about as
Right.
much as I know
He
about
was,
the details behind the soccer of
yeah.
that.
I
But
think what happened actually is that these growth hormones were very expensive and
mhm,
couldn't afford them.
yeah,
And he wanted to stay in Argentina, of course. He was young, he was like 14 years old,
yeah, he was
but
14 when he
he
left, I
couldn't
think.
afford these. And um, But he was the Spanish teams were offering him the ability to they would take care of that for him.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if he wanted to be a soccer player, he needed to do that. And they, that was the future of his. It's really what made him. Well, I can't say that that's what made him great, but it gave him a little bit of edge that he needed to get to
Mm-hmm.
5'7".
Yeah.
But soccer is one of those great sports that it doesn't matter what your physical, your physicality is. You can be 6'9" and play soccer at the elite level, and you can be 5'4" and play
Mm-hmm.
soccer at the elite level. Some of the best soccer players in the world are short
Mm-hmm.
because they're low to the ground. They have that balance that a 6'9" person wouldn't have. The 6'9" person has height, so headers in from the corner always. You need a tall person for that. So,
are there really 6'9" soccer players?
Yeah, there are. Yeah,
Wow.
and there's some soccer players that are built like linebackers. They're most of them are strikers. The 6'9" or 6'5" players, usually defenders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they're and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what area of the world they're from. There are great players in every area of the world from
Mm-hmm.
every country, and just go to the Premier League and watch that on Saturdays, and it's just it's the United Nations of talent, if you will. Soccer talent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the question I wanted to ask you is, based upon looking at some of the success stories and the great story that you talked about as well, what would be some of the things that tools that we can use? One of the things, I talked about in the last episode was positive self-talk.
Yeah.
Change your mindset, shift your perspective, like we talked about in the beginning. Do you have any particular ways or techniques that you particularly use when you run into recognizing that you're thinking about things wrong and you need to shift your perspective on that or anything like that?
Yeah. I mean,
I'd love to hear
it's
some
really
of
no
that.
secret. I share this with everybody now. I used to never share it, but I've suffered from depression most of my life, and
Right.
always had to try and fight. I've had to fight to get my my attitude where it needed to be, and sometimes I just can't do it. So
Yeah.
first of all, just I always say to other people, just give yourself a break. It doesn't matter. All of the stuff we're trying to do doesn't matter. Just relax. You're perfect as you are.
Mm-hmm.
I think the spiritual part of me says, my understanding is like, I'm here for a reason. God put me here for a reason. And you can't know love without fear. Fear is the opposite of love. Just like you can't know left without right. You can't know light unless there's darkness. So every problem in your life is here for you. It's here for you to understand the opposite of it. And so that depression, I've been able to look at and go, okay, that depression is here to show me the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Joy. The opposite of depression is pure, unadulterated joy. Depression is the opposite of that. I'll tell you that right now. And for someone who's never suffered from depression, it's just not understandable. You just can't understand it. But for me, one of the things that helped me is I just call it my daily dose. I needed a daily dose of something positive. And that's why I started Mastery TV, is because there are thousands of amazing videos out there that will give you a daily dose of something that you need. And we used to create them back when we started in 2004. We started 2 years before YouTube started. We were the only one out there with a video channel that was positive and motivational. Now, just go to YouTube; they're everywhere. So what we did on Mastery TV is we still produce videos, but we mostly get the best videos from all over the internet, and we put them on YouTube, and you can get there and get a new video every day of somebody that you're going to relate to, somebody positive. I think we have 5,000 videos on there right now. And then what we also did for people that need that spiritual element, and that's not a religious site, it's a very spiritual site. It's just about, I call it simple spirituality, deciding, figuring out what love means. Yeah.
I like that term.
SoulDoctorTV.com.
Yeah.
So MasteryTV.com for the entrepreneur in you, and SoulDoctorTV.com for the spirit in you. And take what works for you. This is what I say to everybody: take what works for you, and just don't judge the rest, because every time you judge somebody else, you're really judging yourself. They
Mhm.
call it the shadow, if you will. Like all the things that bother us about other people are the
Mhm.
things that we're afraid of ourselves. And it's the characteristics of ourselves that we're really attracting and we're building. So just like Wilma Rudolph's mother, focus on the hope and let all the other stuff just go by, because
Mhm.
the hope is what we have. That's why,
Right.
we're here and in this world, in this life, whether you believe it's for one lifetime or if you believe it's many lifetimes. If you want to enjoy this life, you've got to focus on that. And if you have depression like me, get help. I mean, that's the
Mhm.
first thing I would say. Get help. There are people out there, whether it's therapy or medication or natural medications or whatever
Mhm.
works for you. Find a way to get the chemistry back. And then once your head is to get the chemistry right, you know, the one thing you can do I know of, and by the way, I know you're a fan of Andrew Huberman. He's got some great things about
Mhm.
dopamine and keeping yourself even, all that stuff. Great podcast. You should have him on this podcast someday. He's fantastic with the
I'll see if
science.
it'll fit me into his busy schedule.
Yeah, yeah. That would be great to have him on.
Tim Ferriss probably calls him up and says, "Hey, Andrew."
Yeah,
He's
right.
been on with Tim Ferriss a lot of times, so
He has been on
I'll
Ferris,
be a
right?
little bit behind the Tim Ferriss power
Listen,
on that one.
you're gonna this thing's gonna explode. You know why? I think we're in a time, Jared, that we're in a time right now where the planet and people are just I don't want to say ascending, because that just sounds
Mhm.
too like ooey gooey, but there's a big change. There's a shift in consciousness. The 2022 Nobel Prize in Physics,
Mhm.
as you may know, yeah, you totally know. We've talked about this. And it was to three men who showed overwhelming evidence that matter is not real. It's not real locally. It's not real. That means fundamentally, it's not
Mhm.
real. Matter is as a projection of
Well, you know
consciousness.
what? Why don't you recap that? I mean, I know a little bit about it, but not
Yeah.
nearly as deep as you. And I'd actually like to hear some more about. Tell me specifically a few more details about that. What did these guys do to figure this out? Do you know?
All right. Well, it all goes back to the early 1900s when
Hmm.
uh, uh, Planck, who was the father of quantum
Sure.
physics, Max Planck, and Niels Bohr and Albert Einstein were all discovering this new world that made no sense to physics. We had physics as we know it, Newtonian
Hmm.
physics,
Sure.
but below physics, as you get to the micro, very quantum level of particles, what they discovered is that there were several experiments, and the two that I think matter the most here, one of them is called the double slit experiment. And what they noticed is that when you don't observe energy of like light going through two slits,
Hmm.
when you don't observe it, it acts like a wave. When you observe it, it acts like a particle. This is like so fundamentally messing with their brains, they couldn't figure it out. So Einstein said, I think what it is that Newtonian physics is real. We just have to figure out why matter is the Einstein thought matter is the foundation of reality, and we don't know why this is happening, but we'll figure it out someday. And Max Planck, Niels Bohr said, I don't think so. I think what this tells us is that matter is produced by observation, by consciousness. And in the years since, three gentlemen, one in the 60s, one in the 80s, I forget the exact dates they did, but over the last 70 years, uh, produced experiments that showed without question that matter is not real, that the
Hmm.
fundamental nature of reality is consciousness. Now, to some people, this is like shocking. It's like seems like not real. Like, how can you say that? I can knock on the wood. That sounds pretty real to me. But I want to give you like just a little backup. Take it back just a few hundred years when everybody knew that the sun revolved around the earth. You could see it every
Hmm.
day. It came up from the east and it went to the west. It's obvious the sun goes around the earth. We see it every day. And Copernicus came out and said, listen, there's been these theories that it's the other way around. And I did the math and I figured it out. It's actually, the math shows that the earth goes around the sun. And when he said that, it was like he was ignored. No one listened to him. It was like it took 150 years for everybody to generally accept that the Earth goes around the sun, not the sun going around the Earth. That we live in a solar system, not an Earth system. 150 years.
Well, how long did it
Well,
take them to figure out that the Earth wasn't flat?
there's another one, right? Yeah. Now let's not go into that one. There's enough.
No, we don't have the time for that.
But yeah, we don't have time for that. But it took 150 years. Well, we're about 100 years into the discovery of this quantum world, and it's about time people stop looking and saying, "Hey, it's real. I can hit on it." Just like saying the sun goes around the Earth. Well, the math, and the evidence, not just math, but evidence shows that consciousness creates reality. Consciousness creates matter. And once you understand that, man, everything changes. And this is what I mean about spirituality. It's not religious, but if you take that, it fits every religion on the planet. Every religion has been saying this for thousands of years, and science is now coming around.
Right.
And I was just talking to a researcher at Brown University, and she said the hottest PhD right now is in consciousness, because all the physicists have been saying this for years, but once the Nobel Prize came out, it kind of like shocked the rest of science. And there are some institutions that have been studying this for years: University of Virginia, Institute of Noetic Sciences. There is so much evidence and so many examples of psychic phenomenon. In other words, here's the perfect one. This is, if you want to know, does consciousness create matter? Well, in almost every study on medicine, the effect, about 40% of the effect of drugs is mental. What do you call that? Just slipped my mind for a second. The placebo effect. Right. The placebo effect is about 40%. 40%. And what most scientists do is just go, yes, placebo effect. That's with everything. They just ignore that. Oh, come on now. How can you can't ignore this? 40% of all drugs are proven true with sugar pills. You get a sugar pill and you get the results that the drug should have. How can you just ignore this? Now that you know that consciousness creates reality, what's happened there is the belief has created the truth with 40% of the people. Right. So that's just one example.
And that lines up directly with, what the guys, all the, back to like the Napoleon Hill guys, the Carnegie times, yes. If you say something over and over again long enough, it's going to happen. Then it gets into the manifestation, affirmation, and all the, the trends out there now. And then before, I think we're going to have to wrap it up relatively soon, but I was thinking about this. I did not know that that's the hottest new PhD out there, but that doesn't surprise me, because
according to I haven't done the double check on that, but
that's more and more. Either way, it just makes sense with what we see out there in the world, right? I mean, look at social media right now. Look at all these people that are doing ayahuasca, that are, if you look at some of the stuff that's coming out on Netflix, there's a lot of stuff about psychedelic drugs and the benefits now, and how the government I think in the Nixon administration, in its war on drugs, shut that whole line of research down. And it's taken 20, 30, 40 years to get that back now. And people are now starting to do more research on that, which I think is extremely fascinating. And I was speaking I mentioned Tim Ferriss earlier. He's been a big proponent. I've been following him for a long time now. And he one of his big things is how he's trying to help out with a lot of his philanthropy and giving back. He's funding a lot of good research that's going on in that area. So between the intersection of spirituality and science, who knows if
it's
that
here.
Whole
The science of consciousness
neuroplasticity kind of ties into all that with what's going on with the psychedelic and those kind of religious or pseudo religious experiences that are, and breakthroughs that people are actually having in their own lives. So I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, and so I will say this, that because a lot of people ask me, your spiritual awakening, was it drug related? Mine was
Mhm.
just like
Mhm.
random. It came out of nowhere. And but I gave myself a year to repeat that through
Mhm.
meditation. I have not repeated it. I mean, what happened to me was just so profoundly impactful
Mhm.
that I wanted to change my name. I
Yeah.
almost changed my because you remember my first interview was with you right
You
after.
know, I remember that conversation like it
Yeah,
was yesterday. And but which makes me want to ask the same question here is, though you may not be able to recreate that experience because that was very profound, maybe it's a once in a
yeah,
lifetime, more than likely it is a once in a lifetime
right.
opportunity or situation or whatnot. But it planted something in you. It planted some kind of positive
Changed everything.
seed,
Yeah,
because did it not affect your daily uh world? I mean, what do you do going about day to day? There's been
yeah.
big changes in your life since I've known you to, and since you had this experience, right?
I will say this.
Mhm.
I can summarize what happened to me in a quote from Mother Teresa.
Okay.
All my life I have been going for it. You know, I want to be rich. I want to be successful. I want to
Mhm.
have the cars. I want to have the house. I want to have the freedom. Really, it was more for me. It was more about freedom. I want to be able to do whatever I want when I want. Da, da, da. And those are all really good goals, and I'm not dissing those goals.
Mhm.
Still have goals like that. But Mother Teresa said, you don't need to do big things. Just do small things with big love.
Mhm.
And, in my encounter with with the other side, across the veil, the spiritual side, I was told, you don't need to prove yourself to anyone. You're
Mhm.
perfect. You've always been loved. You always will be loved. And all you need to do is do small things with big love.
Yeah.
And
I
that
like it.
just changed everything for me.
It's true, you know?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, again, it's a mindset, but it's also a reminder of that comparison trap, right? I like to call it the comparison trap. When
Great.
people get stuck getting into that, keeping up with the Joneses mentality or comparing themselves to what other people may have, that's when they create a bad outcome for themselves. And it
The
makes it very
anxiety.
hard to shift your perception over
Absolutely.
to that positive love side of things that you were just talking about. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yep. It's good stuff, man. Yeah, I'm really
Absolutely.
happy
I
to
think we should
podcast.
probably wrap it up on that note. We've
Yeah,
got a few more minutes left before I know you have to take off, and I appreciate you jumping on here. And I'll shoot you a text once it goes up. We've now got it out there, just to give a little plug for this. It's on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, uh, Google just picked it up.
YouTube. Get that on YouTube, man. That's where I watch all my
Well,
podcasts.
we'll put it on YouTube. I can't connect it exactly the way I think it connects to the other thing, just on a technical side of things, but it's a different thing. But I'll definitely, now that
I'll
we
show you
have
how.
this on video, I'll
Yeah,
put this up.
exactly. Yeah, the
Yeah.
video sides. You can
Yeah.
also
We'll for
do,
sure get it
as
up.
you know, you just put an image up and play the audio. I listen to a lot of
Yeah.
podcasts that
Exactly.
way. Yeah, right,
Exactly. Yeah.
right.
Of course. I do know we can do that. But either way, it's out there, and I'll let you know once I publish it up, and we'll get it going on. And I appreciate it. We don't even have to do a third episode now, because we already talked about the
We
practical
do two
tips
episodes a
for
month.
developing a positive mindset and maintaining it.
Jared, I am really, really excited to see where this goes. I've
All right.
known you long enough to know that your thinking and your just gift in interviewing is going to go a long way, and we're at the right time, right place. So I'm looking forward to seeing this grow.
Well, I appreciate it much, man. I really do. Love you like a brother from another mother.
You got it.
All right, man.
All
Take
right, Nico.
care. Thanks
Bye
again.
bye.
Bye.
Yeah.